piling.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's Monday. I love verdicts. Literally, it is the most exciting part of a trial. And if you're in the business of true crime, like me, Verdict Watch is what it's all about. And we're in one. Kind of. I mean, officially and unofficially. Let me explain. Lori Vallow did her closing today, and the prosecutors did too. And so now all that's left is the crying. Or, leaping for joy. Her closing argument, if you'll call it that, was a hot mess. Can I call it that? I'm going to play for you the lowlights, highlights. But can I just say, I'm not a lawyer, and I know that you should not have objections during your openings and your closings. And can I just say, that lady right there got more objections in her closing than her opening. Don't act as your own lawyer. It's not a good idea, especially if you're up for murder. I'm going to give you the lowdown on all of that and tell you what the deal is with the jury. Also, this is a big night for Karen Read. Big. It is the eve of her murder trial. Redux 2.0. Overdue, do-over, whatever you want to call it. She's going back on trial tomorrow for the murder of her boyfriend. But I have rarely seen a case where the stuff that's in their briefcases is actually better than the stuff in the prosecutor's briefcase. I'm just telling you, again, I ain't a lawyer, but her case is bigger, broader, bolder, and badasser than the case it seems the prosecutors have on her. But don't ask me. Ask the granddaddy of all mega star-struck trials, and that's Mark Geragos. Today, I pinned him down on the Karen Read trial, and the stuff he has to say, I think we should all take heed. Might be something Karen Read, if she's still awake, wants to hear as well. Okay, that's coming up. And then also, I have a picture of a guy who's appearing in front of a judge. And the question I have for you is, why is he smiling? Why is this guy smiling? Here's a hint. This has something to do with the letter on his shirt, and it is nothing to smile about. Here's another hint. He's a teacher, or at least he was. And here's a third hint. The witnesses in his case will more than likely be kids, students, if it ever gets back into an actual courtroom. So I'm going to leave you with that little riddle. You can imagine all that. Again, it has to do with the letter on his shirt and the fact that he was a teacher. Let's start here. You can pick the most sympathetic jury. You can even move them to tears with your opening statement. And you can squeeze in the best possible testimony out of every single witness. But if you do not stick the landing, you can blow the case, right? And if you are not just the lawyer, but also the client, you got some problems, my friend. Closing arguments are usually where you find the best drama in any trial. Arizona versus Lori Vallow has delivered the drama, and she did not disappoint today. Lori Vallow stood up, walked over, put on the old glasses to look smarter. Maybe she needs them. I don't know. And she did the closing argument herself. And my friends, it is must-see TV. At issue, of course, is whether she, as the defendant, conspired with her now dead brother to murder her fourth husband back in 2019. And I will remind you that in her opening statement 2 weeks ago today, the prosecutor, who was, one table over, had to break in 4 times with objections. Pro tip, you are really not supposed to have any objections during your openings. And you're not supposed to have any objections during your closings either. But today, Lori bested even herself. The prosecutor had to step in and object 8 times. 8 during closings. Here, without further ado, is Lori Vallow in all her glory.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the state of Arizona has the 100% burden of proving that I committed a crime, a grievous crime, conspiracy to commit premeditated murder of my husband, Charles Vallow. The state has the burden of proving to you that this event was not self-defense. In your jury instruction under the instruction, use of force and crime prevention, the last line reads, if the state fails to carry this burden, then you must find the defendant not guilty. We heard from Detective Inklin's testimony that her goal was to make small talk with us. And
States the facts.
The jury will determine what the testimony did or did not show.
My police interview happened that very morning, and I told the police the events from my perspective at that time. It is admitted into evidence and will answer many of your questions. You did not see Tylee's interview, but we did learn from Detective Inklin that she did an interview that morning as well. You did not see Alex's interview, but we learned that Alex was interviewed that morning by Detective Moffett, the original case agent, whom we did not hear from in this trial. The state chose not to show you those interviews.
Object, Your Honor.
Or let you listen to the 911 call.
Right.
The jury shall disregard that last statement. Okay, the jury can only consider what was admitted into evidence.
The walkthrough is not recorded. Detective Duncan also informed us that he does not know if any of the people present wrote a report about it. We can infer from Detective Duncan's testimony and the fact that we don't have in evidence any body cam footage of the walkthrough and no reports talking about it, that there are none, even though this would be crucial evidence for you, the jury, to have.
Sustained, the jury should disregard that comment. Again, the jury can only consider evidence that was admitted into testimony. Testimony that was admitted into evidence or exhibits that were admitted into evidence.
The state of Arizona has the obligation to show you evidence to prove that this event was not self-defense, as stated by the only 3 witnesses. So why not show the jury all the evidence that they gathered?
Again, sustained. The jury can only consider the evidence and testimony that was admitted into evidence.
We heard a lot in this trial about the Book of Mormon prophet named Nephi. This is the state's evidence to murder over self-defense, and it is utterly ridiculous. We heard from Detective Duncan, who admitted on the stand that he had no idea what I meant in the text message when I said, we will be like Nephi. In Mormon culture, Nephi signifies strong faith, perseverance, and courage.
Right. Sustained.
And if you have not seen the evidence that leaves you firmly convinced that I have committed this very crime, then the state failed to show you the evidence that you need. Because I did not commit this crime.
I'm like, it was a drinking game at one point, right? It was the prosecution that actually went first, right? Laid out the strong evidence in detail, be it scientific or religious. Take a look.
Everyone told you that she said things like she didn't need to repent, she didn't need forgiveness, she could do whatever she wanted now, that she was in a celestial state, translated, that she is spiritually and physically changing, that she's above the priesthood, that she knew who was dark and evil. You saw those text messages both about Charles and heard from people, as well as about Brandon and Zach and Adam. People who were helping Charles were also dark or Z's. And ultimately, what did we learn? That she associated herself with Nephi, a prophet, a holy man, who was justified and asked by God to kill Laban. What we know is that Lori Vallow thought she was like Nephi, that she was justified in killing Charles. That her brother, who was supposed to be like her, was also justified in killing Charles. But Lori Vallow is not justified under Arizona law, nor is Alex. We know from the physical scene itself that Charles did not use a bat. We know from the physical evidence of Alex's 1-inch cut to his head and the lack of blood or concussion, the lack of damage to the mirrors, the walls, the location of the bat in relation to Charles, they all tell us that Charles did not use a bat. We know that Charles was a semi-professional baseball player. This would not have ended that way if he had had a bat. But even if you somehow think that he did have a bat and he was swinging it at Alex, the defendant, whoever, he still was not justified in shooting him when he was on the ground. The jury instructions tell you to use reason, common sense, and experience. Charles Vallow is dead today because this defendant and her brother Alex Cox conspired to kill him. They planned it out, and they had their weapons, and they orchestrated a way to ensure that Charles was back in the house where he was shot and killed for money and Chad Daybell. The evidence proves to you that Lori Vallow Daybell is guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and the state asks you to hold her accountable and find her guilty.
And then it's up to them, right? Literally, the jury's then just like, off you go. And they got to figure out, what do we do now? What I think they usually do first is they settle in, put their bags down, put their stuff on the table, and then look around and say, should we go around the table and do a vote? Because oftentimes that is what happens. And there are times when they all vote one way on that first go-round. It's why you can have a 6-minute guilty verdict, which we have seen before, right? Not in this case. They haven't started yet. It's going to happen tomorrow. But I want to bring in two people who know this story better than anyone. Lindsay Holler is the producer of my podcast, Drop Dead Serious. She was in court all day watching this happen today. And Gigi McKelvey is the host of the podcast Pretty Lies and Alibi. She's been living this nightmare for 6 years now. All right, to the two of you, thank you so much for joining me. Lindsay, I'm going to start with you. What was the reaction of the jurors to Lori's closing argument and the myriad objections, one after the other?
I think the jury today was soaking it all in, and I think also at this point they were used to this. This is not the first time she's been objected to. They've been laughing in the past. It was a little bit hard to see today. I will say overall they were poker-faced, but it's hard not to have a reaction when you're seeing that happen.
Yeah, Gigi, the old expression is, you can either win or lose a case in openings, or you can win or lose a case in closings. And when you see objection after objection, even if you're used to it from a bungling lawyer who's not a lawyer, it tends to have an effect. What are your estimations of the performance of the prosecutor next to the performance of Lori Vallow?
It's night and day. Lori's not an attorney. And at times we saw her make this very personal as opposed to what a real defense attorney would do, which would be attack the witnesses on cross-exam. Lori made it personal. I was there for 2 weeks, saw the jury get tickled a few times when she was objected to. And so I assume today they had plenty to laugh at with the number of objections. You know, the judge at one point was like, again, objection, or, you know, sustained. I mean, it was just nonstop. It was almost embarrassing for her, but not really.
Yeah, at this point, I think Lindsay has a point, right? That they've been watching this rodeo for a couple weeks, so they're almost immune to the effect of the constant objections. I will say almost, because I still think you've got to stick the landing, and that's not sticking the landing. So, Lindsay, one thing I think our viewers, if they haven't watched every inch of the trial, might be surprised to hear is that this jury never heard that she's a convicted murderer 3 times over and that she killed her own kids. Can you explain why that is, that they didn't hear in a murder trial that she's already a child murderer?
Well, they couldn't hear it in this case because it could only come out if Lori testified or if she opened herself up to it by her own questions during cross-examination. And that didn't happen. But it was very interesting because there were a few times where Kay Woodcock used JJ in the past tense form. She said, the last time I saw him was on this date, which is clearly past. So they have to be wondering what's going on with that and why we haven't heard from Tylee, who Lori says, is her best witness.
Yeah, and Gigi, that's a big deal because you can refer to kids in past tense, but if any of these Arizona jurors didn't follow what happened last year in Idaho, they might just be confused by it all. But sometimes the confusion is frustrating enough to be angry with somebody who won't, be straight with you, like Lori wasn't being straight with these jurors.
Yeah, and I saw that in the 2 weeks there, specifically what Lindsay mentioned when Kay used JJ in the past term, and Lori did as well with Tylee and JJ when she was on cross-exam. There was one male juror that really, you could see the gears were turning when Kay said, I last saw JJ in May of 2019. So it's very evident there is a big elephant in the room these jurors are not hearing about. And I do think as the trials progress, we've seen that sort of click in a way that they know there's something very big missing. And boy, are they going to be in for a big surprise once they render a verdict and find out exactly who Lori Daybell is.
Oh boy, you're not kidding, especially if it's a not guilty verdict. Can you imagine if they render a not guilty verdict only to find out that she thought the same dark spirits existed in her kids right before they were, dead, dismembered, and buried in a pet cemetery and not far away from the pet cemetery? Okay, Lindsay, one other thing that is sort of interesting is that we all saw over and over Lori's brother, Alex, and his comments on the body cam to the police when the police responded to this shooting. And yet, if I'm not mistaken, no one in that courtroom, those jurors, did not see Alex's body cam, and they didn't see, Tylee's body cam statements either when she was taken in for questioning after the shooting as well. Did anyone explain that? Did that ever kind of make sense to anyone? How did that play out?
Well, Lori definitely tried to explain it to the jury and was objected to because it was specifically ruled that those statements cannot come in. In both cases, it's hearsay. And I believe the prosecutor also filed a few motions that you can't benefit from the testimony of someone that you were convicted of murdering. So in Tylee's case, that's why. The jurors did see Alex's body cam. He was on mute, so you really couldn't hear that. But Lori definitely leaned into that. That was one of her patterns in her cross-examination. This is what the state hasn't shown you. Tylee was interviewed. Alex was interviewed. They're hiding stuff from you. That was definitely part of her game plan today.
Oh, it's so frustrating. All the little, hiccups when it comes to criminal procedure. It's not simple. It's not like you can just walk into court and say anything at any time. There are strict rules, and Lori didn't seem to understand that throughout a lot. But look, for a woman who's not a lawyer, she seemed to get enough out there anyway. To the both of you, thank you so much, Lindsay Haller and Gigi McKelvey. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ashleigh.
Thanks, Ashleigh.
Okay. Still to come, it is the eve of Karen Read. Big day tomorrow. Opening statements in her second murder trial. She has been through the meat grinder before, but will it be easier this time round? Up next, defense attorney to the stars, Mark Garagos, with his thoughts about this do-over. Should the prosecution be worried? I got my thoughts. Wait till you hear what Garagos says after the break. In 2024 is about to grab us by the neck once again. Opening statements in the retrial of Karen Read are now just hours away in the same Massachusetts courthouse as the first trial, with the same judge, same charges, and of course the same facts. But this jury may already know those facts going in. I know you do. The police officer boyfriend dead in the snow, prosecution's theory that Read ran him over, the defense's theory that Read was set up by cops who had a beef with him that went too far. So who's got the stronger case going in this time round? She doesn't even have to make a case, right? But holy cow, does she ever have one? Earlier today, I spoke with Mark Garagos, renowned criminal defense attorney and longtime friend of the show. Here's our conversation about that. Mark, what's your 30,000-foot view on the Karen Read case, part two? I feel like we've been to this rodeo before, and so have many people in that jurisdiction.
I'm very perplexed by this case in a lot of ways. Number one, I don't understand how the prosecution actually got a hung jury the first time around. I mean, you take a look at the evidence in this case, and it just goes to show you that jury selection is everything, because if you gave this case to most jurors would say this is the definition of reasonable doubt. So the second time around, I don't think that it's gotten better for the prosecution. I mean, if you are talking about having an investigating officer or an officer who's close to the investigation getting terminated between trial number one and trial number two, that certainly is a blow to the prosecution.
And also, Karen has been able to hire a juror from round one who happens to be a lawyer. And I assume that is pretty powerful ammo.
Oh, I did that once, actually twice, where I've hired a juror from a previous case. And it is unbelievable the insight that you get from the jurors. But after they have sat on it, I've often said to jurors, and it's not my thought, it's theirs. When I talk to a jury afterwards, it's inevitable. It happens almost every single time that those 12 jurors who are deliberating come up with something that neither of the lawyers thought of was that important. And it was something that kind of supercomputer, artificial intelligence kind of symbiotic relationship of 12 people produces. I mean, it is really an amazing phenomenon, one of the beauties of our Constitution, because they really go deep and they look at it from a lot of different angles.
So the one thing I think of when I think of the overall information that I have learned from trial number one, from, the docuseries, and even go down the rabbit hole on any piece of social media. But the number one thing I have sort of boiled it down to is that she has a bigger, more robust case that someone else did this than the prosecutors have that she did this. That's fine when you're outside of court. But how do you streamline that and get that to the jury when you're inside of court?
Well, a lot of times the conventional wisdom is that the second trial, and I've had my share of them, so I've seen it. The second trial, the conventional wisdom is better for the prosecution. I don't think that's the case here. I think that they have seen exactly how this is unfolded. I think Alan Jackson, and in full disclosure, I've known him since he was a young DA. Alan Jackson has the advantage here. I think if you're handicapping this, he now knows where everything is going to be. He now knows exactly what people are going to say or not going to say. That does not help the prosecution because, as you've said, there is a robust case when you tick off the items, whether it is the coroner, whether it is the injuries to others who were there, whether it's the texting, whether it's the kind of motive of the investigating officer and the horrific things he was saying about her and their predisposition, the fact that there were independent witnesses who did not see what later miraculously turned up. I just think it's as powerful a defense case as I can think of in recent history.
I feel the same way. I can't believe that they chose to re-prosecute just based on the strength of the evidence that Alan Jackson and Karen Reed put together for the first defense. The only thing I think of, and this is just off the top of my head, is that the strongest evidence they have against her is that she put her car in reverse and went 24 miles an hour for 60 feet that night at the time when, it all aligns that she dropped him off. But even that, a lot of people peel out after they've dropped someone off who they're mad at and take off. It doesn't say that you hit them. And then everything else that is strong broken taillight in that same vicinity. His DNA is on the taillight. His hair is found on the side of the car. Those very strong pieces of evidence are equally blown away by the defense. I've cleaned my taillight off with my hand as a Winnipegger, and that's what John could have done. The hair on John, it could have frozen to the side of that car. That's easy to, there's just a lot of different things that you could explain away, which, as you just said earlier, is reasonable doubt.
By the way, the reversing for a period of time, I think, helps the defense. I think there's an argument there that proves that she didn't hit him, because if she hit him, there would have been some breaking and there would have been some evidence based on what I know about black box technology and the technology that they have, or that they have the ability to extract. I think that actually helps her. I think the fact, you'll remember this, Ashleigh, because if I remember correctly, you did a show on this, where they flip-flopped the video as well. The prosecution did, which, explanation for that, except you want to just kind of distract and deflect from what the reality is. How do you explain on the one witness, participant, whatever you want to label the person, the scratches on the knuckles? How do you explain that the injuries by your expert, your so-called expert, are inconsistent with getting hit by a car? There is a jury instruction on circumstantial evidence cases, and it's basically the definition of reasonable doubt. If there are two interpretations, one that points towards guilt, one that points towards innocence, even if they're not evenly balanced, you must acquit. And so in a circumstantial evidence case, I just don't get how the prosecution prevails in this case.
Let me ask you one more question. I don't know if they talk about a woman scorned, but it's something that bothers me every time I hear Karen's voicemails to John that night. The tone of voice, the profanity that she uses. I think the state wants to say this is a woman who was so angry, that they were clearly in a fight. That's motive to kill him. I look at it like that's a woman who is so angry at a guy she thinks is currently sleeping with another woman, not sleeping in the snow. And I just wonder how a male defense attorney, Alan Jackson, puts that across to female and male jurors. Is this the voicemail of a woman who just killed her boyfriend? Or is this the voicemail of a woman who thinks he's very much alive and cheating on her?
Well, I don't have as much information as I would like to have from trial one about the male-female composition of who voted for guilt and who voted for acquittal. I would want to know that, because I generally, as a rule, as a defense lawyer, think that women are hardest on women. I mean, that's just been my experience in a whole lot of cases. And I would love to know if that held true, and what the split was, and who held out, and whether or not, if you've got an alternate juror or a juror from the first trial, what kind of insights they give you as to that very issue that you very astutely put your finger on. Because that, a lot of times, and I've been there, you are on the receiving end of they didn't act right style evidence, or this doesn't hew to the common experience. You know that you traffic in that. And I love your insight on that. That's something that a male may not, or somebody who identifies as a male, may not necessarily pick up on, but I guarantee you that Karen would probably tell AJ that, and I'll bet you that the other juror who's now acting as a lawyer has probably made that same point that you're making right now.
I can't wait for this trial. You got to come back and let's talk through it as we go through the next few weeks.
We may even take a road trip up there and do a field trip into the courtroom, so stay tuned.
Okay, I'm booking you on that day. Thanks, Mark Garagos.
Thank you, Ashleigh.
And a great thanks to Mark for that. Be sure to check out his podcasts, Reasonable Doubt, and Two Angry Men with Harvey Levin of TMZ, both great podcasts. Okay, still to come, I can think of a few reasons you might wear a big, wide grin in a courtroom, but none of them apply to this guy. He's a high school teacher and baseball coach in Phoenix, or he used to be anyway. And let's just say there are parents in Phoenix tonight who would love to wipe that smile off his face. I'll tell you why next. This next outrage. Can I just say that we are not going out of our way to find awful stories about teachers every night? They just seem to keep finding us. And tonight's humdinger comes to us from Phoenix, courtesy of Eric Curtis Chapman. Chapman was a teacher and a baseball coach at Cortez High School until police came to see him last Wednesday before the opening bell. They say they got a tip that he was sending nude photos of himself to a minor online, but that allegedly wasn't the half of it. Authorities say once in custody, Chapman admitted to, quote, having filmed sexual interactions on his high school campus, end quote, in classrooms, a locker room, and a car, apparently. Of course, the key question here would be, with whom was he interacting? And they say he identified two current male students, both minors, and one former student who is now an adult, end quote. Tonight, he is charged with 7 counts of sexual conduct with a minor and 11 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor. Yet somehow, when he went before a judge in Phoenix last Thursday, there he is. Eric Chapman was all smiles. Prosecutors, on the other hand, were not.
When law enforcement interviewed the suspect, he admitted to sexual acts happening as recently as last week. The state believes that he's a danger to the community.
Eric Chapman claims to have met his alleged victims through adult dating apps. But wait, there's more. Police say they also found volumes of child porn on his phone and his computer, some depicting kids as young as 7. He's being held on a $250,000 full cash bond. So the smile? Yeah, not so sure that was wise. I'm joined now by David Gerke. He is the defense attorney for the late Mary Kay Letourneau, who you'll remember was a teacher who had sex with and who went on to marry and have children with a 6th grade student named Vallow. David, it's good to have you back on the show. Thanks for being here. What's your impression of this defendant showing up in court with a big old grin?
Well, it fits everything else we know about it. When the police come and arrest you, shut up. Don't say anything. No. Oh, yeah, I had sex with someone last week. Other kids I had sex with. All those pictures on my computer, yeah, I knew they were there. My impression of him is he's an idiot and he's guilty. And let me rephrase that. He's presumed innocent until a judge finds him guilty or a jury, or unless he admits his guilt in a court of law. But admitting it to the police, probably a videotape confession, he doesn't have much chance.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of, David, is that if he said it after he'd invoked his Miranda rights, then maybe they can have that stuff suppressed at trial. But then you've got these 100 files allegedly found on his phone of kiddie porn. So those are 2 separate crimes, right? Alleged crimes. But does one of them really support the other?
Oh, absolutely. If he says that was an adult dating site, I don't go into little kids. I was fooled. Well, how come you've got hundreds of pictures of child porn? Doesn't fit. And each picture, you've got hundreds of pictures in federal court and in most states. I'm not sure about Arizona, but in most states, each picture is a separate count of possession of child pornography. And so if it was just 1 or 2 pictures, he could say, I didn't know they were on there, but his computer is loaded with it. And one ties in with the other.
Yeah, that's troublesome. Let me ask you this. As Mary Kay Letourneau's attorney, I remember 28 years ago that a lot of people said, what's the big deal? The kid's lucky. And it was a very different sort of zeitgeist back then than it is now. But do you think that this guy is going to suffer consequences unlike what a woman, a female teacher in his position today would be facing?
Absolutely. The extreme, of course, is he'll be sent to prison more than likely, and he'll be killed there by an inmate. Child molesters don't last long in prison. So he's facing that already. He's made victims of these boys. No one's going around to them saying, hey, way to go, you got lucky. They did that with Billy. Because everybody like, well, Mary Kay Letourneau, she's beautiful. The teacher, everybody wanted, way to go, Billy. These poor kids, whether they consented, were tricked, forced, whatever, their names will get out, probably already are out in the school. And they will be vilified. They'll be called homosexuals, gay, be demeaned, all of that. And we don't know and may never know what led to them being involved with this guy. A teacher, a coach, that's a lot of power over a kid when you're in high school, when they're in the same high school as you.
Yeah. I'll just reiterate, Eric Curtis Chapman, grinning in court or not, is presumed innocent until he's found guilty in a court of law. But David Gerke, thank you so much. It's good to see you again. I appreciate this.
Thank you. I enjoy the show and appreciate being part of it. Take care.
We'll see you again. We'll see you again for sure. Coming up next, you can tell how hard just a few weeks in jail can be based on what you look like when you show up for court, especially if you compare that court picture to what you looked like before being booked. Take Kelly Bryant, for instance. Her hair and her eyebrows were on fleek before being arrested for leaving her 3 little kids to live alone in their own filth for 5 years. But oh, what a difference those weeks in jail can mean. Going to bring you up to date on this nightmare in Detroit when we come back. Life in a Detroit area jail does not agree with Kelly Bryant, and vice versa. If that name sounds familiar, you are probably recalling the case of 3 small children, Bryant's children, who spent half a decade on their own, abandoned, in a townhouse that only one of them ever stepped out of in all that time. The kids were just, get this, 7, 8, and 10 years old when Bryant allegedly stashed them there to survive on weekly anonymous food deliveries that came to the front door. When they were finally rescued this past February, now aged 12, 13, and 15, both the kids and the house were in abysmal condition. Trash piled 4 feet high, the walls covered in mold and smeared with human waste. Allegedly, Bryant never sent the kids any kind of hygiene or cleaning products and kept them so terrified that her son said he only left the house twice. Once just so that he could feel the grass. Police say the kids' toenails were so long that they could barely walk anyway. They didn't know how to brush their teeth. They didn't know how to flush a toilet. And obviously, they had not been to school. By stark contrast, Kelly Bryant looked pretty pulled together when she was arrested. There she is there. You can see that her her hair is nicely kept. Her eyebrows are awesome, perfectly manicured. But lockup, it turns out, can take its toll. After 2 months in the custody of Oakland County, Kelly Bryant looked a little less than on point last week when she faced a judge for a probable cause hearing. She also asked that her bond, which was originally set at a staggering $250 million, but then lowered to $79,000, be lowered even further. Her lawyer says that Bryant can't come up with the cash and that she really, really, really wants to breathe some clean, fresh air. But the judge said no. Judge refused. Kelly Bryant's next court appearance is May 16th. And yes, as I promised last time and the time before that, I will be watching and I will update you. Coming up, being hot and bothered is one thing. Bothering the neighbors is something else. Setting fire to 2 neighbors' houses and your own house and a couple of cars with toys that are not safe for work, that'll get you a not so honorable mention on Banfield, and that mention is next. Harry Torres thinks he's hot, or if Harry Torres thinks he's hot stuff. But Harry Torres needed a quick lesson in bringing the heat before last Wednesday. For the record, steamy is okay. Smoky, not okay. Heat, okay. Fire, not okay. Harry's little corner of Staten Island briefly became the hottest spot in New York because police say he set fire to a pair of sex toys in his backyard. The resulting flames not only set his own house on fire, they ignited 2 neighboring homes and a pair of cars, too. Why he did it is a mystery, topped only by why he admitted to doing it. Police say Harry Torres told them, quote, "I started the fire. I was in the backyard at my house and I lit 2 sex toys on fire," end quote. Luckily, no one was hurt, but Torres was trucked off to jail, still in his plush blue bathrobe and slippers. His confession notwithstanding, he pleaded not guilty to arson, reckless endangerment, and criminal mischief. He is due back in court in June, but his prospects for getting out on the town before that just went up in smoke. Thank you, everybody, for watching tonight. Good to have